welcome back to another Just 5 Mins. How would you like to create your own Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, that sort of thing? I was going to say without paying for it, but of course, ultimately you've got to pay for something. But you'd only pay for storage. Okay, so what am I talking about? It is something called FileCloud. Now, I know there's probably lots of these out there, open source, etc. But this one, FileCloud, seems to be, I've got to try it, I have to say, seems to be quite an enterprise type solution with some enterprisey type features for data security and things like that. And there is a community edition available that's free. Obviously, it's going to have some sort of limitations compared to like an enterprise version. Okay, but I'll put the links in. You can have a look. But what it's basically doing is, I suppose, you could replace OneDrive and Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever it is that you're using. But you can own the data. So instead of paying a service, which is all very convenient, and I do use OneDrive. I don't use Dropbox as much as I used to, but still, I'm essentially paying for it because I'm paying for Office 365 Home or Microsoft 365 Home, and you get, you know, quite a lot of storage, but you are paying that every month. So what FileCloud does, and there is another one called NextCloud that seems to be a bit more home-based focused, really, which I'll touch on and put a link in as well. But yeah, it's access files remotely through a virtual drive. You can map a drive to your you know, Windows, Linux, or whatever. I don't know if it works with Macs. I've got to have a look at that. But it does like the usual sync. What was that, sync thing or something? I think my good friend Tim had at one point, or something like that. So it seems to do that. But the interesting thing is that it's got a lot of features. I'm not going to go through all of them today, but you can sort of deploy this in some interesting ways. You can deploy it on a Windows machine, Linux, or any cloud VM. And the idea is you could have your own. It depends how, you know, how stable your internet connection is, I suppose, and things like that. But you can set this up so that you've got, you know, like even if you've got a small NAS drive or a, dare I say, an external, you know, hard drive or whatever it might be. So you can set it up completely on just a machine in your own network and still access it through securely through your own router. But you can also set it up on like just a small Linux VM, for instance. So that's the bit where, yeah, you'd be paying a little bit of that in the cloud to actually host your solution, but it doesn't seem to have very large specs. And you can also deploy it as Docker as well, so you can do that. But the point being is, I suppose at some point you think, well, if I've got to host this, but either way, it's worth having a look because you can get some very cheap sort of reliable hosting, and you know, you can then connect to things like Amazon S3, Azure, you know, storage, things like that anyway for your main storage. If you want to put it, actually, it's a bit weird. It's like putting it in the cloud already, sort of thing. But you can certainly run it offline, as it were, in your own network, which is, I think, quite useful. Yeah, there's loads of different things that it has. It's got, you know, sync across computers, smartphones. You know, it's basically like a Dropbox, but without having to pay for an ongoing monthly cost. So, as I say, there is the hosting question, but there's quite a few decent options out there that you wouldn't necessarily be paying overly too much for. But again, it's also the ownership of that data, isn't it? You've got data in Google or Dropbox or OneDrive or whatever. Yeah, you know, it's convenient, and is it ever going to go bye-bye? Well, maybe not, but you never know. You know, you're at the whim of these big sort of tech companies. So if you feel like you want to have more control over it, then yeah, I think it's worth at least a look. Like I said, they you know, FileCloud seems to have a enterprise level data encryptions. Now, as I say, you're going to have to check the license and what's included, but the community edition seems to have quite a lot of those types of features. But as I said, very quickly, there is, I don't know if this is actually linked to that same company, FileCloud. I've got a feeling it probably is, but they have something called NextCloud, which is a little bit more aimed at the home user, and that's worth a look at as well. I'll put both links in the notes below, of course, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, worth having a quick look. So I am going to leave it there for this one, and we'll catch you on the next one.